Welcome, everybody. I hope you can hear me okay. um, I'm Carmel Mall with Writing for Peace, and I'm here with Brad Wetzler, who's on our board. He's also the guest editor for our Resistance Journal, which will be coming out August 1st. And we're welcoming today with us Lyla June Johnston. Hi, Lyla.
Hi, thank you for having me.
We're so happy to have you. Lyla was one of our very first advisors, and that was back in, I think you started back in 2012, and you've done so much beautiful work for us since then. So we're really, really excited to have you here. So the bio.
And then can you mute everyone too who's not speaking?
Everybody muted? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, there's a couple people. If you could just mute yourself if you're not speaking, thank you. Okay, cool, we're good.
Okay. So Lyla June Johnston, known publicly as Lyla June, is an Indigenous musician, scholar, and community servant of Diné Navajo, and I'm going to mispronounce this, Lyla June, Setsa I'm sorry, Cheyenne,
Yeah.
and European. Can you say it for us?
I'm still learning how to say it too, so no worries, but it's tsestese.
It's a beautiful word, beautiful. And European lineages. Her dynamic, multi-genre presentation style has engaged audiences across the globe towards personal, collective, ecological healing. She blends studies in human ecology at Stanford, graduate work in Indigenous pedagogy, and the traditional worldview she grew up with to inform her perspectives and solutions. She is currently pursuing her doctoral degree, focusing on Indigenous food systems revitalization. I'm just going to read one more little bit here. Lyla June is a student of global cycles of violence that eventually gave rise to the Native American Holocaust and the destruction of many cyclic relationships between human beings and nature. This exploration birthed her passion for revitalizing spiritual relationships with Mother Earth and cultivating spaces for forgiveness and reconciliation to occur between cultural groups. So it's a beautiful background that you have, and it's meant a lot to so many of us who've kind of been on a similar journey. You know, I at 50 years old, I started a similar journey as Lyla, and your words have really kind of led the way. So thank you for that. And Lyla is going to read an essay that has appeared. I think you wrote it first for Writing for Peace, and then it just has exploded. It's been everywhere. So maybe, Lyla, could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so I was asked to write an entry for Spiritual Ecology, this book. And I was so excited, and I just sat down at my computer and I started writing out this piece about, being European, because I am part European. I'm Native American and European, and so I always felt like a little bit of shame for being European, to be honest. Shame for being part of the colonizer and the slave master, and I just didn't feel comfortable in my own skin. So this essay is actually about realizing that I am beautiful and every part of me is beautiful. And really realizing that we're not only should claim our European side, but really be proud of not the most recent parts, perhaps, but the deep history of Europe, where you have people honoring the earth, you have a goddess culture, you have matriarchy as the norm, and you have, if you look at the archaeology of Europe previous to 4,000 BC, you have a lot of incredible civilizations thriving on the land that are really quite different than what we see today. And so that's sort of what the essay is about, is sort of relieving the shame of being part European and actually coming to have a lot of pride in it, not in a weird supremacist way, but in a true way of being rooted to my indigenous European history. And that took a lot of research, trying to understand what happened to our people over there with the Roman expansion and the witch hunts and, the Inquisition and all this crazy stuff. And really showing the parallels of how what European indigenous peoples went through is actually really similar to what Native Americans went through. They're just in different stages of colonization. So yeah,
so
I can
you're
go
going to read a little excerpt from the,
yeah, I'm going to read an excerpt from it, and I can go ahead and jump into the poetry reading, or if you want to ask more questions, you could do that, but I'm ready whenever you are.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it.
Okay, so hi everyone. So grateful to be here with all of you, and I have a few poems that I actually copyrighted back in 2014 that I kind of stumbled upon, and I think they're still worth reading. And I also have some newer poems too, and of course the prose excerpt of the the history of indigenous European, culture and that story that I want to share towards the end. And I'm just really grateful that all of you would take time out. I know we've probably been Zooming a lot. I've been Zooming a lot. This is my 4th Zoom call. And I definitely know how it is to be over Zoomed. So thank you for Zooming with me one more time. And yeah, I hope that, and I pray that this poetry reading can bring joy and solace and healing and a sense of collectivity between us all. And I just want to ask you real quick, Carmel, who's in, just so we make sure everything's running smoothly, do you know who's in charge of admitting people from the waiting room? Would that be you, or would that
My husband Craig is.
Okay. Okay, cool.
Craig
So
is,
there's no one in the waiting room right now. Okay, cool. All right. So, oh wait, here we go. Okay. I think I just turned into the host and brought some more people on. I'm gonna make you the host again, Carmel. Let's see, where are you? Or did they just leave? Yeah, Carmel's internet's been off all day, so I think I just magically became the host, which is okay. So, oh no, Carmel's back. Okay. So.
We've got a storm going on.
Okay.
We're up in the Rocky Mountains.
Maybe you should make me a host then, if you don't mind, just in case.
Let's do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, okay, cool. So I'll start with a few poems from a book that I wrote called Torrential Desert Rain. And it's a very fun little compilation. But real quick, Carmel, before I get started, would you be open to making me host real quick? Okay, she is frozen. All right. Okay, well, we'll just go ahead without it then. Oh wait, Carmel, could you make me host real quick? Hello? Okay.
Are you hosted?
Yes, now I'm hosting.
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna turn off the waiting room so people can just jump in. Okay. All right, so here we go. And these poems, you know, are written from my experience going through a lot of healing, and over my lifetime. You know, I used to be a drug addict. I started doing drugs when I was 11, and I am so grateful I got sober when I was about 23. I started getting sober around 20, but I had my last drop of alcohol for good at 23. I'm now 30. So a lot of these poems, you'll see that theme in there, that theme of healing and that theme of transformation. Because I went through quite a big transformation when I was about 20 years old. And I was kind of left for dead in a way because I was doing so much drugs. And I had been abused so much in my life that the drugs were a convenient escape to not feel all of that abuse. And then when I was studying abroad at Stanford University in Chile, South America, I was in an 8.8 magnitude earthquake, and I broke my hip and my spine. And so that's really what kind of culminated this transformation. So you'll hear those themes in here, especially at the time of my life when I wrote these. But I'm hoping that it's relatable, and it's not just about me, but it's about us and about our journey as being human. Because we're all healing in some form or another. Okay, so here we go. Genesis. In the beginning, there was the Word, and he wove worlds from these words. We will weave worlds from our words. So craft every casual conversation carefully, as a playwright does, because we aren't playing make-believe. You see, we make what we believe. You see, this is not a poem. This is the cradle of creation. And I am not a poet. I am a saxophone. And you are cymbals slapped together. And she is the sitar, and we are the music of creation. So sweet creator, strum me like strings, beat me like drums, like wings. Yes, I am the woven. No, I am not the weaver. Yes, I am the dream. And yes, the dream is dreaming. This is not poetry. This is alchemy. So there I'm just talking about, you know, how I had a poetry teacher in high school, and she told me, you know, be careful what poems you write, because sometimes they come true. And I have found that, you know, our words are so powerful. We are so able to make the world with our words. And perhaps why they say in the beginning there was the Word, I don't know. But anyways, this is a really short one. It's untitled. Breaking through the chapped mud, the lizard knew someday he'd find his feathers and fly, just like we know what we will become. And that one's just kind of about, you know, I guess the long arc of things of like, who the heck knows what we're going to become? Just like a lot of species don't know what they're going to become. But we can help to make what we become better through love for all things. This is about the earthquake experience. A man awakes in Christchurch, in Haiti, in Japan, in Chile, and suddenly all the money in his pockets is worthless compared to his daughter's beating heart. Late one night, you prayed for death, and the earthquake asks you, are you sure? And so at the time of my life, you know, I was really praying for death. I was really this world had become so challenging for me, and the abuse had accumulated so much. Because when you're an alcoholic at the age of 12, you know, people take advantage of you, people do mean things to your body. You know, I just was so much, I couldn't really exist anymore very well. And so I was praying for death at the time that the earthquake came, and thinking I'd be just better off home with Creator. So I'd ask Creator, you know, can you bring me home? And I got my wish. You know, I did die that day because I fell 3 stories from a building during the earthquake, and on the way down, I don't remember what happened, but I just remember waking up and everything hurting really bad, broken pelvis and 3 shattered or fractured vertebrae, and you know, that's when I really realized that I wanted to live. Oddly enough, I had to die to realize I wanted to live. But they say that on the way down, I left, you know, because they say the time it took to fall 3 stories in the spirit world was like 2 months, because, you know, they go at the speed of light, everything's faster, they get a lot done the time it takes to fall. And, you know, Einstein's theory of relativity, when you go at the speed of light, time expands. And so, yeah, they counseled me supposedly on the way down. They kind of were like, are you sure you want to die? You know, you could go back to Earth and do some good things. And I decided to come back. But apparently that happens to a lot of people, you know, like there's a lot of people who either get in car crashes and they die. And then they come back and they decide to come back. Okay, so this is another short one. A gold panner sings in the river all day. He sings in the river, sifting for gold all his life. Sometime later, as he becomes old and gray, he takes his last breath with all his belongings packed and his hat on the rack. He wishes he could buy meaning in this moment. He wishes he could buy meaning in this moment, but he can't, because all along it was free and he didn't know it. That's my little critique on capitalism. But okay. Nothing feels this sweet. Everything we've built, everything we've held, getting lost and falling away, like seaweed in the undertow. Nothing feels as sweet as learning how to let it all go. Clouds soaring into each other and falling apart. Recycled visions and dreams dropping against the parched canvas of the earth, soaking in the candied aspirations of 1 trillion souls. Masterpieces crafted and blown apart just as quick by these wondrous flames. Old growth forests and cigarette embers and my great-great-grandmother's name. Everyone thought it would be remembered. That pre-Columbian kiss on the banks of the Mississippi. Everyone thought it would be remembered when the first fern unfurled silently in the sunlight. When we had our majestic exodus from warlock politicians, or the time when a tree like lightning sparked in the sky, waving hello and waving goodbye. Or even the time when I fell madly in love with you. Everyone thought that a blazing sunset as surreal as that would freeze into the sky forever. But who knew? It too would be washed away, like all sand paintings are. But what we do know is this: that when all the stories that I've ever walked upon the earth are finally taken by the tide, God will fall back into her bed and weep into the sheets, feeling sweet and raw, rolling memories in her mind until they are no longer jagged and dangerous, just as the ocean rolls shards of glass until they feel sacred again. So, I'm still trying to figure out what that poem's about, but something about everything being temporary. So this next one I wrote because I found myself accidentally taking care of some horses, and yeah, it was quite the experience. So I'll go ahead and read it. Hunting for horse placenta in the forest. There is lore that if you slather it on the newborn foal, that the mother will recognize the scent and allow it to nurse. Getting in touch with the rawness of life. Apparently, milk, urine, poop, and baby ponies all come out of the same general area of a female horse. Miraculous. The first milk of a mare is the most nutritious, containing antibodies the pony will need for the rest of its life. They call it colostrum. This angry mare, she would starve the foal before she let it drink from her milk. Horse abuse had thoroughly stripped her of any mothering instincts. And yet this little pony would die without that first milk. Have you ever milked a horse? I am asked. No, I have not, but I will do it for Harmony. Harmony was the name of the pony. Milking a wild horse every 3 hours is daunting, but when a pony's life is at stake, there is no time for fear. It's 3:30 a.m. and I'm in the ring. I close my eyes and acknowledge the seventh sacred direction, Chokan Wakan, the sacred center. Just then, a fearful flash pierces my mind's eye. A white mare with lips curled back, teeth bared, neck stretched, ears back, tail switching, hooves stomping. Shh. Listen. God is answering a prayer spoken many moons ago. In junior high, I vowed to be a peaceful, vegan do-gooder. I was a self-proclaimed nun at age 12 and deeply afraid of confrontation. I studied Gandhi but didn't understand everything he said. I could breathe in Satya, in and out easily, love and truth. But I choked on Graha. I couldn't understand it, force and might. I asked Creator, why must we fight to love? But it's 3:30 a.m. and I'm learning that Gandhi was infinitely fiercer than the whole of the British Army. Do you have what it takes to belt out the song of love in the face of a gun barrel? Do you have what it takes to stand your ground against a bucking mare? When a pony's life is at stake, there is no time for fear. I will fight for this. So that one's called Fight Good. All right. So I started to think about life, and how in a lot of ways we're sort of like, or not in a lot of ways, in I guess what I think is that we are spirits who come here temporarily and spirits who get this human suit for a little while, and we go around and try to make this world a better place, and then we get old and then we die. And then some of us come back and do it again. And so I didn't really understand this fully, but I've come to believe it for myself personally. And so when I learned this, was around that time when I had this transformation of just kind of realizing that I wasn't Lyla, you know? I have that name right now, but I'm a lot older than that. And all of us here are a lot older than that. We're just here for a little while. But when you open your eyes in this body, when you're born, and you don't really have any other memory but this life, you know, you start to identify pretty heavily with your specific name, your government name, your parents, your everything. And you kind of forget that, you know, it's kind of cliche, but you're not a human being have a spiritual experience, but you're a spiritual being having a human experience. And so anyways, that's kind of what this is about, kind of realizing all that. It's called dawning flesh. Standing on the ledge of suffering, a spirit decides to walk the gauntlet of humanhood. Naked and armed with nothing but trust, enters through a sacred passageway that this world calls the cervix. Breathing air, donning flesh, speaking words, facing blades in the name of the next 7 generations to come. Nothing will send a soul into the labyrinth of humanhood but the cry of his children lost in the maze. So go ahead, go in, be human, get lost. Everybody does, everybody will. It is the only way you will find the way out. And when you do find your way out of the maze, please bring others with you. The grandmothers and the grandfathers are tired of watching them suffer. This is the place where we do not measure time in seconds. We measure time in lessons. The day you learned to tie your shoes, the day you learned to pray for your enemies. All these lessons wrapped up in our skin. The days when we could break beneath the weight of the beauty and pain that shakes us awake. This is the land of danger and bravery, where we can only ever discover that we are breathtaking, risk-taking miracles, equipped with razor-tipped faith and an insatiable appetite for growth and grace, whatever it takes. Spirit never dies, but only gives way to the changing landscape. We take on a new face and change our last name, but forever we are fueled by that original flame. This is the place where we do not measure time in seconds. We measure time in lessons, every flesh wound a blessing. This is where you will be born. This is where you will die. This is where you will be born. This is where you will die. This is where you will be born. And this is where you will learn to fly. And nothing will send you running back to your mother like the piercing wind. And so once, after many cold nights of drowning myself in the sweetest syrup of overstimulation and hollow gratification, I was picked up off the street. Great strong arms lifted my fragile frame and carried it into the hogan, the ceremonial house, where I was wrapped in the blankets of a bare mother's love. Deprived of the bread of truth and driven mad by the chemicals and the hunger, I was shocked at the beauty and the ease of this hearth. And slowly my muscles calmed. and I drank from the goblet of safety for the first time in decades. I sobered and I looked around me to find a council of grandmothers and grandfathers discussing how I would be brought to life. A dash of cedar on the coals, and my frame was cleansed of what is not. Encouraged by their compassion, I rose and stood as what is. Beauty, preciousness, courage, compassion, it is ours. Rebirth of a warrior who was cut by the blades and healed from the labyrinth of life. So thank you for sticking with me through that rather long one. Yeah, by the way, we're just grateful that you're all here, and definitely hoping that these poems can either bring you joy or solace, or maybe both, and hopefully inspire some poetry writing later on. You never know. So let's see. Just a couple more from this anthology. This one's called Take Time. Take time to listen to the waves. Feel each folded droplet becoming immersed in its mother. Feel the multitude of effervescent prayers roll into one another and amount to this wondrous perpetual roar echoing in our skull. Experiment with the idea that maybe everything matters. Each remnant bubble on the shore that lies in the wake of the resigning waves. Each breeze thread in the great tapestry of oceanic winds. Every pelican bobbing out on the sea with lungs that breathe and eyes that see. Even the crab shell fragments and retired seaweed strewn on the sand. Try guessing what the cormorant's favorite time of day is. Could it be mid-morning when sunbeams glint along the water like her flapping wings? Or could it be evening when everything is easy, everyone's bellies are full, and the sun quietly smiles like a proud father? Or could it be dusk when the horizon is flushed with a roseate hue upon the endless sea? When your feathers begin to hold you in tighter and you wonder if you're dreaming big enough these days? Sit and see if the porpoise might jump up and grace your retinas like an ancient myth that reaches forward in the time and touches your life. Experiment with loving yourself unconditionally by getting lost in the velvet sound of her song that goes on and on and on. So, yeah, I think that's the main ones from this anthology. There's a lot of poems here, but I don't want to read all of them. And I want to leave some time at the end for this essay that we were talking about. So, and then we have an hour, right, Carmel?
Yeah,
Okay.
Carmel might not be on right now. She's having some power troubles, but
Oh, she's on. She's
on. Okay, great, good.
Yeah.
I had a question for you. Could I interrupt for a question? You spoke so beautifully about the healing process, and I'm even picking up from your poetry even something more than healing, about more like transformation. And I heard the word alchemy. Could you talk about like how writing has played a part in your healing and transformation?
Yeah. So, well, two things. Number one, when I was in 7th grade, I had no friends. Um, I was, or no, this was eighth grade. And I had this one friend who was getting me really, really high every day. I was eighth grade, a little tiny girl. And I was just like pumped with drugs all the time. And I remember I didn't have any friends and I would eat lunch alone. And in general, I had insomnia. I was just a wreck. And so I remember becoming mute and I couldn't talk for a long time. I basically was scared that if I said something, it would be stupid or it would be, I don't know, that one friend who, you know, was, and the adults around me were also getting me high. So there was just, and they were also very like abusive verbally. So like if I said something, they'd just knock it down, you know? And so I became really scared of speaking. And so at a certain point, I became mute. Like I couldn't speak. Like people would ask me questions even at school and I would just be like, which is really awkward. And then they would just be like, oh, okay, I guess I'm gonna go now. And I'd be like, okay. And then I'd be like, dang it, I messed up again. Like, why didn't I say something? And so when I got back home to my, because my parents were divorced. So when I got to the other home, all of that stuff was gone. And I started writing, right? Because I couldn't speak. So all I could do was write. And I started writing everything, you know, like the deepest pains that I was feeling. Like, man, I'm so angry at myself. I can't even talk to my own parents. I'm so like dumb. You know, I just, everything I felt up in here, I just put it on a page. And somehow that was so therapeutic and that helped me speak again. And the next year, I was on the varsity poetry team because my high school had a poetry, like a varsity team, or like poetry slam. And I was doing spoken word and I was winning like national competitions. So I went from being mute to winning national poetry slams. There's probably a lot to that, but I do know that writing was the thing that unlocked that dam of words that had been building up. And then secondly, I think my writing has also healed with me. Like for instance, when I was 20 and some mentors helped me get sober, what they said was, you know, your issue isn't addiction. Your issue is abuse. You know, the addiction is just your way of running away from the memories. But like your real issue is the memories that you're running from. So you need to go into those memories instead of running away, like run into them, face them, feel them, forgive the people who hurt you. And then if you want to serve Creator, you can be empty of self-absorbed intentions and try to help others. You know, when you write, you know, pray first and ask Creator to maybe help someone with your writing. Don't do it for money, don't do it for fame, which is what I was doing at the time. I know, write for your people. Your people are in trouble right now. They need help, all people. And so I noticed that once I healed, my writing actually got a lot better, you know, because it wasn't about like, oh, I want to be a famous poet, or oh, I want everyone on campus to like me because I was 20 at the time, you know, in college and stuff. And, or, oh, I want to like snag, you know, and have people think I'm cool. And, you know, all of that low self-esteem was driving my poetic craft. But then once it flipped to being of service, and once I healed myself, I also became more of a service-oriented being. Then all of a sudden, my poetry got a lot better. And you know, I could talk more about that, but I won't because we only got 15 minutes. But so yeah, yeah, for sure. There's a lot I could say. I tend to ramble, and before I know it, the hour is over. But okay, so
briefly talk about how your poetry got better? You're not rambling at all. This is fascinating.
okay.
At the end, maybe I don't want to take up your time with the essay, but that question is fascinating to me.
Sure. No. Okay. Well, let's go for it then. So what I was taught by these mentors and these elders is that we are meant to be hollow bones. You know, we are meant to be vessels, channels through which something bigger than us comes through. And the way to become a hollow bone is to get empty of self. It can't be for the self, you know. So if we want fame, if we want recognition, reputation, we want money, when we do our art, that's what we're going to channel. You know, we're going to channel that. That's what's going to come out of us. But if we want our people to be whole, our people to be healed, then that kind of medicine is going to come out of us, and it's just going to be a lot better. And when I say better, I don't mean like, I mean like the essence of it is going to be more worth our breath, more worth our time on earth, more worth more worth our hand and our pen. And so what I often refer to is the word genius has the root word genie, and genie means spirit. And so it was understood, it has been understood for a long time, that a genius is not someone who's so great, but rather a genius is someone who can get out of the way long enough for the spirit to come through them. So, you know, in the Enlightenment era, as they call it, there was people who said, you know, it's not education or intelligence that goes into the making of genius. Love, you know, love is the soul of genius. And so I still struggle with this today, because even right now there's a temptation to be cool or like be a leader or be, you know, I don't know, yeah, be cool, I guess. So be like someone that all of you look up to. You know, there is that temptation of like, I want to do this for me, you know, for my name and my the symbol that I am and all that. But I struggle to always remember, no, we're here on this Zoom call for these beautiful people here. That's why we're here, is to serve for a little while. You know, I only have an hour with you. I want to serve. I want to serve and support your journey. And I want to be a hollow bone. I want the ancestors to flow through me, not to make me look so cool, but rather to reach you, to show you how loved you are, to show you how cradled you are in the arms of grace. And so, you know, that's a constant struggle for me. It's like, no, I'm here, like, you're here for this reason, yeah. But at least I have that training now, whereas before I was just kind of lost to the wolves. So yeah, I'm gonna read another poem now. I haven't done a poetry reading in a long time. I usually play my guitar or do some like electronic music and stuff, because I kind of started doing that more. But yeah, so when I close my eyes at night, I can feel the rock being cut open by water. I hear a grandfather's song, and it sounds like sand walking down the river bottom. And in this song, they talk about how even the mighty canyon walls were carved by meandering streams. And beneath the gentle waters, there are people. not people like you and I, stone people. And when I close my eyes at night, I am one of them. And the river runs over me until I am polished and smooth. She courses over me as she teaches me patience and forgiveness. She teaches me to be gentle, yet persistent. And in her language of trickles and bubbles, she speaks to me. And she says, journeys, journeys take them, but try not to forget who you are along the way. I have nothing for you but these words. So place them in your pocket, and I will see you again when you arrive at the ocean's throne as 1,000,000 kernels of sand. Her voice hums in my blood, quiet as a stream in the night. And it is this song about how we are all just so loved. The eagles dip their talons into her soft body and pull from it a fish, a flesh meal for their children. And they sing this grandfather song with her. And it sounds like feathers cutting into the sky. And it is this song about how we are all just so loved. And it is this song about how even hatred will surrender to wonder. She's breaking my heart apart like a rock, like a stubborn granite puzzle of problems. And even the hardest doubts and sorrows and fears break apart and give way to her infinite grace. And who knew that sometimes grace can come in the form of a raging river that rips away from you everything you thought you owned, all the pain and all the shame and all the blame, and replaces it with a weightlessness so profound that you can't not cry. Tears of absolute praise, and run all around the riverbanks, shouting to the cattails and the minnows and the crawdads about the truth of beauty, about the truth of a God that breathes through the trees, truth of a creator that weaves winter from water and night, the truth of a creator that weaves bodies from dust and light and carries us down the river of life over and over again until we finally understand the meaning of forever, forever. In the language of these stones, there is no word for regret. There is only the complete understanding of what it means to be a beloved son or daughter. We are the rocks, and Creator, she's the water. So that one's called God is the Water. I think I'll just put a little link in here in case anyone wants to read or hear some more of these. Just put it in this little chat thing right here.
Lyla, shall we open up for a few questions from audience members?
Yeah, I do want to read the prose thing just because we said we would, it takes about 5 minutes. But then if I'm happy to stay on an extra 15 minutes after it's over if anyone has questions or anything like that. So yeah, this is not too long. It takes about 4 minutes to read. So yeah. Okay, so this is going back to what I mentioned at the beginning of honoring the indigenous European parts of ourselves. So, okay, here we go. In 2009, archaeologists came across a female effigy believed to be the goddess of the earth, buried in German soil. And this is all true. I'm not just, this is more prose, not necessarily a poem. The radiocarbon dating tests came back. They indicate that this clay deity found in German soil was molded by European hands 40,000 years ago. 40,000 years ago. This is the time we are beckoned to. This is the world our ancestors hope we will remember, where man and woman alike held the soil in their hands and saw the value and sanctity of women and of the earth. This is the world that still flows through our veins, however deafened we may have become to it. And with prayer, we can learn to hear it once again. I compare this earth-based indigenous European culture to the witch-burning psychosis of the first and second millennia. And I cannot help but ask myself, when and how did this egalitarian, earth-loving, woman-honoring culture become the colonial genocidal conquerors that washed up on American shores thousands of years later? Could it be that our beloved indigenous European ancestors were raped and tortured for so many thousands of years that they forgot who they were? Could it be that they lived in a pressure cooker of oppression for so long that conquer or be conquered is all they knew? Yes, I believe so. And so our task as Europeans is to shake the amnesia, to not be ashamed of our Europeanness, but to reclaim our beautiful grandmothers, to reclaim our venerable grandfathers, to reclaim our lost languages, our lost ceremonies, our lost homelands, and become one with the great sacred motherland of Europe once again. The European diaspora is spread all throughout the world, searching the planet for something that lives inside them. I promise you will hear it when you climb the mountains of Switzerland, of Scotland, of Tuscany, of Hungary, of Portugal, of the great sacred motherland of Europe. Just because bad things happened upon her bosom does not mean that she is bad. This land is still sacred. Our task is to honor our ancestors, even those who caved beneath the weight of systematic destruction and then became conquerors themselves. Our task is to remember that we are those beautiful earth people, the ones whose love and prayers were so strong that they could carry a 25-ton bluestone monoliths for miles and miles and build the sacred place of prayer known as Stonehenge. That is who we are. When we remember this, the healing of our lineages comes full circle. When we remember this, we will no longer need to borrow spiritual practices from other cultures, although that can be very helpful sometimes when there's nothing else to hold on to. But when we remember this, we will remember that the fate of all beings are intertwined with our own. And when we remember this, the wholeness in myself, no longer a half-breed, but a daughter of two great lineages, two great rivers that ran together to make one precious child. This is the story of how I became whole. Some days it feels like both fire and water live within me. They dance and swirl around one another. In the morning when I wake up, each bows to the other, honoring themselves as equal, as beautiful. When I go to sleep at night, they wish each other good dreams. They teach me how it could have been when Columbus first stepped on Taino's shores. A meeting of two long lost brothers, embracing each other and celebrating their unique cultures. They teach me how things could have been and can still be for our children in the future. Because that's what matters most, doesn't it? Not how the story goes, but how it ends. We each hold a pen, so let us co-author a story of how humanity fell in love with itself and its Mother Earth once again. So that's just an excerpt from an essay that I wrote that's really about honoring our indigenous European culture and getting deeper than the thin wall of time that dominates our understanding of Europe. And even the word Europe is really fascinating because it comes from a Greco-Roman, myth of Europa. Europa was the daughter of a god, and there was a fight between two men, and they fought to get her back. And so Europe to me is really an embodiment of patriarchy that doesn't really represent the truth of Europe. And if you think about it, this Greco-Roman word, and we know Rome is the birthplace of a lot of dysfunction in our world, that Greco-Roman word was sort of plastered over all of this land that was indigenous land. There's Germanic languages, and Hungarian's a really interesting language because it's not Romanized. It's one of the few that is indigenous. The Basque, of course, are very fascinating people. The Celtic and the Scottish, and there's still remnants of indigenous Europe left. But even that word Europe, the fact that all that land is called Europe instead of the indigenous names for the land, and that came from Rome, is indicative of our own colonization within that area of the world. And so just like America is called America, and my people on my mom's side, the Native American side, they would prefer not to call this land America, because that's Amerigo Vespucci who was looking for slaves and gold, and we don't condone that. And so there's a lot to think about in terms of our European indigenous ancestry. Anyways, I'm going to stop there and open to any comments or questions. Maybe go to 8:15 Central Time at the latest. Does that sound good, Carla?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
that sounds great. This is wonderful. Anybody have any questions for Lyla June? Well, I don't know. Do we need to turn the mics on, or?
I think it's
Sure.
on.
Ah,
They could raise a hand. Or-
I see some familiar names here. It's nice to see you guys here. Lyla, this has just been really, really meaningful and beautiful having you here and listening to your poetry. I haven't heard a lot of these most recent poems, and I like what Brad said about them. There is a transformational quality, but there's also just they're deeply rooted. And I wonder, well, I mean, you kind of are talking about that, about the connection to the earth, and it's just, it's so powerful, as far as transformation on an individual level, but also on a macro level.
Yeah.
But, could you talk a little bit about your activism? And, many of our writers are young, and they're trying to find paths to use their writing in ways that'll make a difference. And you just do it so beautifully. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, I heard, I don't know if she really said this, but I heard that Winona LaDuke once said, why does wanting clean water make me an activist? And then I also heard that she followed that up saying, and why does destroying clean water not make you a terrorist? But anyways, so I kind of fall in line with that line of thinking. Is like, I don't see myself as an activist. I see myself as just a person who is doing normal person things, like caring about children, like helping my friends who are everyone, and helping, you know, making sure we have clean water, just normal stuff, you know. And even when I was running for office last January and February, I was labeled as an activist because I was trying to do like a green platform, and I just didn't understand that label. I'm like, I'm not an activist. We're all gonna die, you know, if we don't stop fossil fuel addiction. So maybe we should stop that. And so I just find it funny how I keep getting called an activist. But at the same time, anything that's like remotely charged and wanting to help the world is often put in the category of activism. And I think it's good to be active, but I just think that, I don't know, I ever since that transformation, I was always kind of a, you know, an organizer, community organizer and stuff, but ever since that transformation, it really got stronger, and the desire to, well, not the desire, but the realization that I had agency to change things, that I had the power to, really amplified. So that's when things got really quite just amped up a level or two, and I was just nonstop kind of working to just be of service wherever I was and wherever creator called me to be. And so I think, and not hating myself, you know, like when you're doing all the drugs and you're getting abused and blah, 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 you kind of don't feel worthy of helping the world. I mean, you kind of think like, oh, who has been through that? Who does she think she is to like go and be all, you know, like an angel out there? You know, she's not an angel. She's a dirty piece of crap, you know, because that's how people treated her. So once I realized I wasn't that, and I actually was, we all are, you know, angels in flesh, then I was like, okay, cool. I can actually spread my wings a little bit and roll up my sleeves and get to work. So anyways, yeah, any other questions, any other ideas, anything like that?
Well, I have a question, but there's a question in the chat.
Oh yes,
Are you going to write more? It was from Farm Fresh at the very bottom.
Write more for educators, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, are you going to write more for educators, legends and stories? I would like to. Actually, you know, a lot of educators use my stuff already, so that's nice. A lot of college professors. I wrote a book called, it's a book of poetry that's published. It's like kind of more fancy, like an actual book that a lot of professors use. It's all about Indigenous rights and the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, and, you know, how do we enact those. And so, but I would like to write more for educators. I probably would need your help, someone like you, to help me like know what people need and how to frame it. But yeah, I would like to.
I had a question too. That wasn't my question. I just redirected it.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
I was wondering, two questions. You can answer either of them, but I was really interested. I write poetry as well, and I find maybe I'm new to poetry, so I write a lot from the eye and my specific experiences. And I felt that you were writing, it was so nuanced and visceral, but it felt not like just you. It felt like me as well. Does that make sense? Like there was a way, there was a kind of openness to what you were narrating, that I could walk into the river. I was with the story. It wasn't you testifying for a specific, I do more testimonial kind of writing at this point.
Yeah.
So I really was moved at how it's specific and visceral and graphic it felt, but it also felt like anyone could enter the poem. Does that make sense? And find grace there.
Well, that's great to hear. I'm really glad, because sometimes I worry that my poetry is too like all about me or something.
No,
so
I didn't feel that way at all. I just was wondering how you got there, because I feel my poetry is all about me.
Okay, and then did you have any other questions?
The other question was, and this is about your prose piece. I'm really moved by that. I had Anishinaabe scholar say to me, she asked me, where is your homeland? Like where, because I was thinking about how often, I'm from Canada, and often white people, Indigenous, or interested in Indigenous studies, we kind of tip a bit and almost do, even if we're not doing strict cultural appropriation, there is a kind of tipping, as if we're finding ourselves there, as opposed to finding ourselves in our own, like rooting ourselves, like the way that you asked us to think more about historically, where was our relationship to land? What happened to care? What happened to kinship? It was there sometime. And my family's from the Arctic region of Norway, and so she suggested I go back, and I was very interested. But the question is, those movements can sometimes be a move to innocence. So white people not wanting to, like, I'm Irish, I could move to, I could have a claim, but that erases the ways that I've been constituted as white in relationship to atrocity and my responsibilities to that atrocity. Does that make sense? Like, how do you hold both those?
I think you hold both of them by holding both of them. In other words, be rooted in your ancestral lands, and also be accountable to the land you're standing on. You can do both. In fact, they support one another, in my mind, because if you are fighting for Indigenous rights in Canada, but you don't know your own Indigenousness, it's a little bit contrary, right? You're part of the tapestry too. You're not like a disembodied brain walking around helping Indigenous rights. Like, you have a body and you have a genetics and you have a place that you were rooted in. So like, if you're all about Indigenous, like the notion of being Indigenous to a place in Canada and supporting people who are, then it would make sense that you were also that your own Indigenousness was important to you too. But yeah, I have heard people say that, like, there's a move to innocence, and to me, knowing yourself, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm really open to this, but to me, knowing yourself and where you're from, for one thing, like I say, like, we don't have to go to India and become Hindu. We don't have to go to, a sweat lodge and become Lakota. We don't have to do that cultural appropriation, as some people call it. And that actually helps us be more accountable to the cultures around us, because we're not, but at the same time, I know a lot of Lakota people are very happy to give people spiritual guidance. Like that they're one tribe that is very generous and open with their spiritual practice. So that's another story. But that's one advantage, is if you know yourself, then you're not grasping and trying to not just colonize people's land, but then colonize their spiritual practice as well. So that's one good thing. Another good thing is, if you know yourself, then you're not acting from guilt and shame. And if you're not acting from guilt and shame, then you can help those around you more fluently and more authentically. Then it's actually because you want to help, not you feel like you have to make up for something. And I'm really open to your thoughts on this. It's just my thinking. And then I also think that, or maybe I should ask you a question. How does being rooted in your Indigenous culture as a European person prevent you from fighting for Indigenous rights in Canada? That's what I don't understand.
I loved everything you said. I'm agreeing. I loved it. And I do a lot of family history, and I feel that gives me that sense of, I know what stories I come from. I come from my own, like, oral storytellers in my family, and I know my family traditions. And I'm Jewish, I know my rituals. And so there isn't that kind of, I respect them, I learned from traditions that aren't mine, but I don't have that kind of, that I'm just floating around there and grabbing, But I also, I know sometimes people will make claims of their own oppression and do you know what I mean? Like, and there's a kind of move. So I really like what you said about holding both, and it's that complexity that is, I just found that really beautiful, and it was a beautiful answer.
Yeah, I think I get what you're saying now. But what I was thinking writing this is I'm going to help European folks see that they are also oppressed.
Yeah.
And that will help them understand and empathize with the people they are oppressing. That's what I was thinking.
No, it was beautiful.
Like for instance, if someone reads, say you're Welsh, you're 1/4 Welsh or whatever, and you realize that your language was destroyed by the British Crown systematically as late as the 1930s, and that kids would get blocks of wood tied around their neck if they got caught speaking Welsh and could only take it off if they caught another kid speaking Welsh. And you feel how egregious that is, then all of a sudden maybe you're like, oh snaps, maybe I should stop that from happening to Native children here. That's what I thought. But I could see how people could turn it and say like, oh well, you're just giving white folks an opportunity to feel oppressed so that they don't, you know what I mean? So that they don't feel like they're, so that they don't have to reckon with what they've done, But I think it actually helps because it's like we could start to see what happened to us as Europeans and then realize like, oh, I don't want to perpetuate that. Like you could feel the hurt and you're like, oh, that sucks. I'm not going to ever let that happen to anyone
I think
ever.
Can I jump in here for a minute?
I don't want to keep talking.
Lyla?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
I'm gonna have to wrap up here, but would you please, would you read another poem to end the evening with?
I would, and I'm sorry, Juniper White 13, I did not get to your question, but maybe I will.
Have you back? I know. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I'll answer it some other way. But yes, let me end with a poem. Thank you so much. All right. It is dawn. The sun is rising in the sky, and my grandmother and I are singing prayers to the horizon. This morning, she's teaching me the meaning of Honjon, although there's no direct translation from Diné-Bizaad, the Navajo language, into English. Every living being knows what Honjon means. For Honjon is every drop of rain. It's every leaf on every tree. It's every feather on the bluebird's wing. Honjon is undeniable beauty. And my grandmother knows this well, for she speaks the same language that grew out of the desert floors, like red stone arms reaching into the sky and praising creation for all of its brilliance. Honjon is remembering that we are a part of the earth's brilliance. It is remembering that humanity is an expression of the earth's brilliance. And my grandmother knows this well, for she speaks the same language as Lukachukai's snowstorms. She speaks the same language as hooves hitting the dirt on birthdays. And she became fluent as a midwife, galloping to the women in labor, fluent in the language of suffering mothers, and fluent in the language of joyful mothers, fluent in the language of handing a glowing newborn to its creator. Honjon is an experience, but it is not something you can experience on your own, the eagles tell us, as they lock talons in the stratosphere and fall to the earth as one. Honjon is inter-beauty. Inter-beauty, and my grandmother knows this well because she speaks the same language as the male rain, which shoots lightning bolts through the sky and pummels the green corn children and huddles the horses against the cliffsides in the early afternoon. She also speaks the language of the female rain, which sends the scent of dust and sage into our homes, and casts rainbows in the sky. Astene, we know what Honjon means. And each and every one of you here, you know what Honjon means. And deep down inside, I think that we know what Honjon does not mean. Like the days we walk in sadness, like the days we walk in fear, like the days we live for money, or like the days that I lived for fame. or like the days when the conquistadors came, when they climbed down from their horses and told us that they were going to take the mountains. Now we knew this was not Honjon because we knew you could not own a mountain. But we knew we could make it Honjon once again. So we took their silver swords and we took their silver coins and we melted them with fire and buffalo hide bellows and recast them into silver jewelry pieces and placed them around their necks. We took the silver helmets off of their heads and transformed it into a fearless form of beauty. We made jewelry. Honjon is the healing of our broken bones. It's the healing of our broken hearts. It's the prayer that carried my people through genocide, through disease. Honjon is the prayer that will carry us through anything, through this global warming, through this global fear that dances thin as illusion, like a shadow in our minds. This morning, my grandmother is teaching me something very important. She's teaching me that sometimes the easiest and most elegant way to defeat an army of hatred is to sing to it beautiful songs until it falls to its knees and surrenders. It will do this, she says, because it will have finally found a sweeter fire than revenge, a sweeter fire than greed. It will have found Honjon. And so my grandmother is talking to the colors of the sky at dawn. And she is saying, Honjon Hasli, Honjon Hasli, Honjon Hasli, Honjon Hasli, which means beauty and joy are restored again. It is dawn, my friends. Wake up. The night is over.
Wow, thank you. Thank you for this wonderful evening, and thank you everybody for joining us. And yeah, very special evening. So many thanks, and look forward to the next reading in 2 weeks. And yeah, well, I'm gonna have to end the meeting now, but thank you very much. I'm kind of speechless by that last poem, so thank you.
Thank you. Thank all of you. And here's to being a hollow bone. And yeah, have a wonderful evening, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lyla. That was beautiful. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Talk soon.